My four horsemen of the apocalypse, or just the horsemen, both in supernatural and in the Bible, are four entities that possess unimaginable power, and they can simply destroy the entire world. They're the living embodiment of the four primordial concepts that bring about the end times, essentially acting as gatekeepers who open the doors and initiate the end of the world. Although, according to the Bible, it's actually the Lamb who starts opening the seals, and then the horsemen come and everything else happens. And even though they're extremely ancient beings, they can still manifest in physical form, meaning they can have a vessel in supernatural. In fact, ironically, or unfortunately, they can also be hurt just like a regular person. In the series, they're called War, Famine, Pestilence, and Death. And to interact with the world itself and channel their abilities, each of them has a special ring. Without this artifact, their physical forms end up falling apart except for Death, who is the most powerful of them all and transcends this need. And since we're in modern times now, unlike in the Bible, they stopped using their horses and started using cars. And honestly, I found this detail a bit strange because I think it would make more sense for them to use motorcycles. But it's fine, it still looked cool. With these cars, they travel from one place to another, and their colors match the colors mentioned in the Bible for the horses. However, when Lucifer ended up getting out of his cage, the fate of the horsemen changed a little. Because when Lucifer started the whole mess, he kind of began to lead this group. He started demanding that these horsemen kill humanity and wipe it out. However, the horsemen's rings actually hold a little secret. There's something extra at the end. These rings are actually the keys to Lucifer's cage. In other words, ironically, those who help him spread chaos and wipe out humanity can also end up banishing the master of hell back to the abyss. And as you can see, there's already quite a difference between the horsemen in the series and the horsemen in the Bible. After all, I don't think the horsemen would ever use cars. But the really cool thing the series does is that they kind of portray the horsemen as a divine or demonic kind of being, separate from angels and demons, which I agree with and think is really cool, because I don't think they fit with any other kind of beings from the Bible. They really have to be separate. And yes, guys, I know it's a metaphor, the horsemen of the apocalypse and all that, but I like to think mythologically to me, they really do exist as beings. And honestly, I really doubt that the horsemen would be controlled by Lucifer. And I think they're above Lucifer in power. In fact, I think they work for God. Let's begin with a mythological analysis of each horseman from Supernatural. Supernatural. Oh. And when the second seal was opened, I heard the second creature saying, "Come and see." And another horse, fiery red, went out. And it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and a great sword was given to him. Well, as you can see, this one is actually the second seal, right? The second horseman, but we're going to talk about them in the order they appeared in the series. And in this case, we're going to talk about War first. Theoretically, he and the other horsemen are already mentioned in the first episode of the 5th season. The moment when Sam and Jim are inside the car, and they start to hear some news that comes on the radio. In that scene, several events are mentioned, and they were probably caused by the horsemen, who were already, in quotes, riding through the world. There are nuclear conflicts, nuclear tests, kind of a flu epidemic, among other things.
Hurricane Kinley devastated the Galveston area. The success of North Korea's nuclear test was announced.
But his own episode is the second one of the 5th season, which, if I'm not mistaken, is called Go With God. And in my opinion, it's the coolest episode about the horsemen of the apocalypse. The episode starts with Sam and Jim keeping Bob company at the hospital, but it doesn't take long before Bob gets a call from Rufus saying he's surrounded by demons. Sam and Jim don't take long to head over there, and when they arrive, the city is deserted. There's no one on the streets, cars are overturned, bridges are broken, a bunch of stuff. And while the two are there trying to figure out what's going on, they're found by Ellen, who's Joe's mother. She takes them to the hideout, but not before slapping Jim in the face. So Ellen takes the two to a hideout where she and a group of people are staying. It doesn't take long before Sam heads to a nearby market to grab a few things, but then he's approached by two so-called demons. I say so-called because even in this scene, you can already tell there's something strange about these demons. Because when Sam kills them, they don't give that little flash that demons usually do when they're really killed. But things get even stranger when Ellen and Sam kind of find what seems to be the demon's base, or at least what they thought would be the demon's base. Because at that moment, Jo shows up and kind of fights her mother, thinking her mother is possessed, while her mother thinks she's the one who's possessed. In fact, at that moment, Jo even says some things as if she really thinks she's fighting a demon, not her mother. Don't look at what used to be my mother, poor black-eyed thing. Well, Ellen manages to escape while Sam is caught by Rufus and also by Jo. Both of them also think that Sam is possessed. When Sam wakes up, he tries to warn everyone there that something strange is going on because they're trying to exorcise him. Meanwhile, Ellen goes back to her group with Jim and starts telling him that Jo had said some strange things to her, and it didn't even make sense for Jo to be possessed because she was wearing an amulet against demons. Jim then starts to think and realize that it doesn't make any sense for those people to be possessed. And then he asks the group if anything strange happened before all of this, and one of them says that they kind of saw a shooting star falling nearby. This refers to a sign of the apocalypse, the wormwood star Jim reads about here, though it's slightly different.
Caiu uma grande estrela do céu.
Phenomenon that she... In her case, a mixed star.
All of that would happen when the third angel blows the trumpet. Then Jim says it should be the Horseman War, who was confusing everyone so they would fight. He even says that probably that red car they saw at the beginning of the episode is probably War's car, or rather, War's horse, which is a red horse. While all this is happening, War is talking to Sam, who's trapped there with another group. He says some really cool things there, including a kind of cliche phrase, but one that I really like. He says that actually he didn't do anything, it's the people who are doing it. The only thing he did was remove the filter, kind of comparing himself to an alcoholic drink. After that, War tries to manipulate things a bit more. He makes it look like Sam hit him. Then he goes to Jim's group and makes Jim and Ellen look possessed, and with that, it kind of starts a war between the two groups. But luckily, Jim manages to snap Rufus out of the trance, so he and Jim go after War and manage to cut off his finger. This version of War is actually kind of cool. They made him more manipulative. I would even say they replaced the sword that the Horseman carries in the Bible with his ring, but other knights have rings too. So I can't say exactly, but I liked him. I'd give him an 8 out of 10. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third creature say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and the one who sat on it. He had a scale in his hand, and I heard a voice among the 4 creatures saying, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and do not harm the oil and the wine." Quite different from what many people think, and I used to think so too. Hunger in the series is not just about the lack of food. It personifies the insatiable emptiness. His presence kind of makes people feel hungry for different things. They might feel hungry for sex, hungry for affection, hungry for attention, and of course hungry for food as well. It kind of turns him into an uncontrollable hunger that leads to self-destruction, no matter who you are. It's funny that we kind of see all these hungers showing up in the episode. The episode opens with the couple almost literally devouring each other just as they're about to get intimate. Castiel himself, who's an angel, had his hunger get out of control in this episode because of his vessel, and he kept wanting to eat red meat. Sam kind of had a hunger for demon blood. There was also a doctor who showed up at the beginning of the episode, but then he also showed up dead because he kind of started drinking uncontrollably until, he died. There was even the extremely needy Cupid in this episode. The only one who wasn't affected in this episode was Jim. That's because, according to Famine himself, he was already dead inside. Well, the one who realizes that Famine was around is Castiel. And he also tells Sam and Jim that Famine is extremely worn out, and he needs to feed on souls until he's healthy enough to ride across the world again. In fact, Famine is really worn out in this episode. He's in a wheelchair and everything, but it's still really cool because when he gets out of his car in one part of the episode, it's awesome to see the demons carrying him kind of like he's a mob boss and then putting him in the chair. Another really cool thing that Famine does is devour the souls of the demons themselves. Yeah, but anyway, Jim and Castiel kind of figure out where Famine is hiding, while Sam is locked in the bathroom because he's afraid of losing control and starting to drink demon blood again. But Famine, being the sneaky guy he is, sends some demons there just so Sam ends up drinking some of their blood and losing control. Meanwhile, Castiel gets caught in a trap because he goes into the diner to check out the place, to see Famine, but Famine ends up giving him meat. He manages to stop eating, but luckily for Jim and Castiel, Sam shows up with his mouth all bloody to save the day. He manages to defeat Famine simply by killing the demons inside him that he had consumed. There are some really cool references in this episode to the horseman Famine from the Bible. Famine's horse in the Bible is a black horse, and here in the series, he uses a black Cadillac. Famine also carries a scale, kind of representing the rationing of food or the lack of food. In the series, this scale sort of represents the balance of each person, or rather the lack of balance in each person. They can't control themselves and end up getting lost in their excesses, whether it's too much sex, food, or drink. I saw when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a loud voice, like thunder, "Come." And I saw a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and he was given a crown, and he went out conquering, bent on conquest. Interestingly, Pestilence is never mentioned as a rider in the book of the Bible. What happens in some interpretations? Well, some interpretations understand the bow this rider receives as it would be a reference to the reach that this rider's power has. Maybe it's a reference to the plagues and diseases that he ends up sending to the world, which reach great distances. Or even in the passage about the rider Death himself, which ends up mentioning Pestilence as well. If we consider this first rider as being Pestilence, the color of his car in Supernatural is different, right? Because there it's kind of yellowish, greenish, kind of reminding us of the description of Death's horse. In theory, if it followed the rider's order, the car's color should be white. Anyway, the appearance of Pestilence in Supernatural is actually pretty cool, and it happens at the very end of the episode Hammer of the Gods, where several gods end up gathering in a hotel, and Ulf ends up killing them afterwards. Right at the end of the episode, Pestilence shows up driving a car, and actually this part of the episode is pretty gross, because he goes into a store there, he's sneezing, he gets mucus on everything, he sneezes in the store clerk's face, he does all sorts of stuff there. They even connect the plague with things like mosquitoes, which is actually pretty cool, and the plague has a pretty important role in Supernatural because he ends up creating the Croatoan virus. Croatoan, by the way, is probably a reference to a legend about a colony where, according to the story, people disappeared without any signs of struggle or anything. The only thing left was the word Croatoan written in certain places. The plan was for Pestilence to create this virus, and it would be distributed around the world as if it were a vaccine for swine flu. Swine flu that Pestilence himself had also spread. All of this just because he simply hates human beings. Well, Sam and Jim, with Crowley's help, they end up finding where Pestilence was, which was kind of like a hospital. When they go inside and get to Pestilence's room, Pestilence throws some diseases at them, and Sam and Jim fall to the ground. Castiel appears then and says a line that made me laugh a lot when I rewatched the episode.
Castiel,
Como chegou aqui?
I took a bus. Castiel, using his powers, manages to rip off Pestilence's finger. They get a ring. And finally we have him. The great, the best of them all, Death. It's an extremely awesome appearance. And when the 4th seal was opened, I heard the voice of the 4th creature saying, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the one who sat on it was named Death, and hell followed him. They were given the power to kill 1/4 of the earth with the sword, with famine, and with plague, and given the power over 1/4 of the earth.
And the 4th one, did she kiss him? Yes, I just asked. No!
And with them, and it all makes sense that Death in this very episode seems and is much stronger than his other siblings. After all, according to this part, the others would work for him. Death's car looks kind of white, gray. If it's gray, that fits because of the cadaverous color. Still, it makes more sense for Pestilence to have this car and Death to have the other. But if you go into detail, who cares? Because, man, the scene where Death is talking to Jean in this episode is so awesome. So awesome that honestly you forget about everything else. Like when he says that Jim is like a bacteria on his desk, that he doesn't matter at all to the universe. Man, it even gives you chills.
You really overestimate your importance. Think about how you would feel if a bacteria sat at your desk and acted like it was important.
Not to mention that Death loves fast food, right? First he eats pizza, and then, in that other season where Sam loses his soul, he starts showing up eating some fries. Man, I love myself. That's obvious, right? Death says he's as old as God, or older, and he'll reap God. But really, he won't actually do it, right? Because kind of after that, death dies. But anyway, let's ignore that. Up until that season, this is one of the best representations of death I've ever seen in all media. It's really good. It's awesome. Leave in the comments which is the best horseman in your opinion. Pestilence, war, famine, or death. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.